Is it okay to put it there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Although I don't think that would mean the absence of picking up anything.
No, I agree. I'm just... Bye.
Can I come back and just, I'd love to hear some of the stuff. See if there's anything I can learn from that. Okay.
Welcome, good evening. My name is Craig, and I'm trying to reduce suffering in product development. Let's get started. AI, HR, and org topologies. In terms of emphasis, this is really a course about AI and HR. There's only a short, brief discussion of org topologies. One might think that I'm bandwagoning, but in fact, no. Starting in the late 1970s, I specialized in AI in university because I found it a fascinating and important subject. My graduate work is in AI. My thesis is in AI. My thesis is actually in machine learning, creating a second-generation AI that learned from a first-generation AI. I was a paid full-time AI developer starting in 1986. So I've been in this world a very long time, not only technically, but fascinated by both the, let's call it the philosophical and the social implications of what this might mean. So this has been my passion for 45 years, amongst others. I think most of you know a little bit about me. Welcome to read my Wikipedia page to learn more. Trends. The first comment I want to make is that I'm not really talking about what's going on today. You might know that every year there's a LESS conference and a keynote, and in my 2020 keynote in Amsterdam, at that keynote 5 years ago was about the coming AI revolution and how this is going to completely transform software development and other domains of work. And every year since then, my LESS keynotes have been focused on that subject as well as others. And since 2020, I've been saying that my interesting endpoint isn't today or last year, it's the end of 2027. And I've been extrapolating this since 2020, seeing kind of the velocity and acceleration of the technology. So the key point I want to make here is I encourage you not to assume that I'm talking about today's AIs, but about 3 years from now. And I believe that by the end of 2027, we'll have an answer to the following question. Can we have AIs that meaningfully do complex knowledge work, like medical diagnosis, software development, and so forth? Rhetorical question, how do people in the comp sci AI world evaluate intelligence quantitatively? You might have heard of something called the Turing test. This is just a joke. Nobody in the AI world takes this seriously. So if you ever hear someone talk about it, you want to run, not walk in the opposite direction. This is not what serious professionals focus on. The state of the art is what are called the ARC tests. And the ARC tests are the premier set of intelligence tests that all the AIs are being put through. And this is a plot over time, and 100% is at the level that is demonstrating the kind of intelligence we see in humans. And interestingly, by the way, none of these tests have anything to do with information recall, which is trivial. All of these tests are about the hard problems of adaptive analogic reasoning, problem solving in new domains, the kinds of hard problems that humans can do, but which have been traditionally very difficult for computers. So these are not trivial tests like the Turing test is trivial. You just have to, sound like a human, which is trivial for today's AIs. These tests are hard, and they really demonstrate human-level intelligence. And look how close we're getting already. And the new ARC-2 tests, by the way, have just been released. Yeah.
What's 100, like human-level intelligence?
Exactly. Illustrating what normally people would consider as human-like intelligence for solving the kinds of complex problems that we consider that humans can do, analogical reasoning and so forth. So another comment I'll make, and we can see it from this graph, is that AI technology is accelerating. And I mean that carefully. I chose that word carefully. I mean the second derivative is above zero. And we humans have never in humanity's history experienced an accelerating technology. Maybe a constant velocity, but nothing like this. So this means 1 year from now, it's faster, faster, faster than the last year. And that means the year after that, it's faster, 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 faster than the year before. So this is unprecedented in human history. So a year in AI tech time isn't the same thing as what we think of. A year could be 100 years of progress to our normal human intuitions. So 3 years from now could be simply extraordinary and explosive. And this is another reason why to be very reticent to jump to conclusions about what these things can do, since we've got this extraordinary accelerating dynamic going on. And to double click on this point, we're not going to be long away from the point where these AIs are so skillful they can create the next generation AIs. And then we enter a loop, a reinforcing loop of acceleration that goes even faster. This is from October 2024. That is so 2024. In 2024, these scientists were awed by O1. Well, now O1 is like, yeah, that's so weak and old-fashioned. Exaggerating, but the point I'm making is, how fast these trends are moving and how impressively quickly these things are getting powerful. Another aspect of this is that people sometimes ask me, well, Craig, aren't the training of these LLMs going to run out of data? Which in fact is true. But many people who raise these questions, or journalists who raise these questions, are apparently oblivious to what's gone on in the AI world, is that they've moved beyond training on data to what's called chain of thought training. So the new generation of AIs, O1, O3, et cetera, aren't focusing on training against the existing corpus of all human knowledge. That's easy, in quotes. Now they're focusing on training these to do chain of thought reasoning, which is a whole new increment of power and intelligence out of these things. And so there's a lot we can still squeeze out of them. And that's just with existing LLM technology. If you follow this world, you might know Yuan LeCun, the chief scientist of Meta, has been promoting a new architecture called JEPA, which is a whole new generation, nothing to do with LLMs, that could take us even to a much further place. So there's a lot of room to grow here. And as I'm sure most of you know, 2 Nobel Prizes were given this year for AI scientists, which is, unprecedented. In chemistry for the creation of AlphaFold, and I was just come from Germany recently, working with the world's largest private pharma R&D company called Boehringer Ingelheim. And they, like the other pharma companies, now realize that with AlphaFold, for which, this is Google, DeepMind is Google, for which Google won the Nobel Prize, because it's going to revolutionize pharma R&D as well. Briefly, a very central question in pharma R&D is what is the folding of proteins? Because the bottom line for a lot of drugs is it has to do with proteins, and the way that they fold represents their behavior and their function and so forth. Now, up until AlphaFold, one PhD would spend 40 years figuring out more or less the folding of one particular molecule. So up until AlphaFold, the total number of deep folding 3D structure analysis that had been done completely was like a handful, taking decades for world experts to do. Now AlphaFold does 1 million in half a second. So this is just going to completely transform pharma R&D. And so software is eating the world, a famous old article by Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, famous VC, founder of Netscape and so forth. The point is that software is taking over domains that we normally considered hardware or non-software. Pharma R&D and on is all becoming soft, and AI is going to move into this and disrupt it. Another example of these trends, so many of you know about Grok, which is the X AI, but not everybody knows that Elon Musk's training center is the world's largest, and not only is it already the world's largest, he's now planning to add 1 million GPUs, making it by far the largest in the world. He, a couple of years ago, got together, as far as I know, with the CEO of NVIDIA and said, how much money do I need to give you to corner the market on being the first in on the next generation chips? Very smart move. And as a result, he's got the most powerful AI training center for the next generation AIs. And so if you're not using Grok at the moment, this is a dark horse that's probably going to become an incredible super intelligence because of the horsepower he's got at training this thing. Not to mention what OpenAI and Google and everyone else is doing as well. Another trend comment I want to make are agents. An AI assistant is what you're all familiar with using, talking to it, asking it to do something, and then it comes back. Agents are different. Agents you do not interact with. They're autonomous software objects just running on their own process with their own goals. And the key thing to understand about agent technology, in contrast to assistant technology, is that an assistant technology, normally you ask it something, it completes the task, and then gives it back to you. Agent technology isn't like that. What you can do with it is agents can participate in iterative improvement. So for example, it's now becoming possible to spin up hundreds or thousands of software agents, each of which is like an O3 model, the most advanced AI model in the world. In other words, you've now got 100 or 1,000 of the most advanced intelligence of the world as software agents, and we give them a goal like create banking software. Just that. And the agents will interact in doing the work and then go through loops of feedback to make it better and better and better so that after 5 seconds you've got banking software. And so this is going to be another revolution. If you don't understand agents yet, that's okay, but agents are going to be huge. That's going to be what probably replaces a lot of humans at work. And that's coming fast. First of all in the software development space, but then moving on. Next comment, already kind of alluded to, please read this. If you have some Igor at work and Igor says, I looked at the AI tool, it's not very good, it can do blah, blah, blah. That's my recommendation. Completely missing the point. It is way too early to make any conclusions at all. This is such a fast-moving space. I urge you not to lock into any conclusions. Likewise with the use of software tools. Do not sign up for a Copilot, license for your company, ... because this space is changing so fast, you could be working with last year's technology, which means last century's technology in AI time. And you don't want to be locked into something that is so weak compared to what's coming out every new week. So I urge your company policies to be really focused on not locking in and just trying to stay abreast to the leading edge. Otherwise, some of your competitors will do that, and they're going to eat your lunch because their AIs will be so much more powerful than yours if you've locked into old-fashioned AIs. Because I'll do a short demo. In order to frame the demo, first, AI as knowledge workers is of course not limited to software-intensive product development. It expands to doctoring, lawyering, accountancy, every form of human knowledge work that we do, physics, mathematics, teaching, anything that humans do that involves intelligence will eventually be able to be done by AIs, if not already. But limiting it to just the subject of software development knowledge work, what are some major roles and related activities? Well, we've got everything from product management all the way through to architecture work. And the point that I want to suggest to you is that in every one of these categories, already AIs could replace these, or probably within 2 or 3 years they will be able to, which of course you can probably extrapolate the implications of that. So, to the demo. I want to start here because, as I mentioned in that list, it included UI, UX analysis, and design. And a simple but key point I want to make is that some people think that these AIs are for generating code. No. AIs can tell you how to improve your UI design. AIs can do medical diagnosis. You probably read the recent report of putting up some of the best AIs against some of the best doctors. The AIs won, and on and on. So the point is that in the various aspects of software development that aren't necessarily code-related, product management, business analysis, UI design, testing, all of that can also be replaced by AIs. Very important to understand. For example, hey, O3, evaluate the UI and UX design of the Amazon homepage and make recommendations for improving it. Oh, says someone in the company, only humans can do that. That's not possible for AIs. That just means I don't want to hear about it. And if we were to go through this, I'm not going to belabor with you all of the details. That's not important. But I've been through this list. It's a quite sophisticated analysis. And I could go further and I could start using tools, AI tools that generate websites according to the best UI, UX design principles, implying the whole end of the need for UI, UX people, of course. And the bigger point I'm making is, remember, this is not limited to code generations. It's all aspect of development. Next example I want to point out is data science. You don't need to hire data scientists anymore. Those days are over. There's hardly a simpler and more straightforward bit of knowledge work up to the postdoc PhD level that you can automate than data science, because it is such a well-scoped and well-defined mathematical domain. That's one of the easiest areas of knowledge work to replace. So once again, I'm making the point this is not limited to something like code. All forms of data analysis can be done by AIs. You don't need to hire those people anymore. For example, first of all, I load a classic data set that's used for playing around in data science. That loads up. And then I say, analyze this data set like an expert data scientist would. Maybe some human data scientist says, oh, they can't analyze like an expert would. No, they can. And tell me some questions and actions you would recommend for analyzing it. And then as an expert data scientist, here's how I'd approach analyzing blah, blah, blah. And then It goes through a whole bunch of analysis, which I've been through, and I have a background in statistics, used to serve as a statistical advisor in a university, so it's a world I know well. And this is good stuff. Then I say, do all of that analysis. Does all of this stuff. And then I say, identify unusual conclusions, the kind of thing that only real experts would be able to pick out. And then it picks out the unusual insights from this analysis. The details aren't important, but the bottom line is this is a very sophisticated analysis. The whole thing took around 30 seconds to run. If a human did this, that would take weeks and not be as good a quality. Moving into the traditional, funny to use that word, traditional AI use, code. Oh, you can't use AIs to automated testing. That's too labor intensive. We don't have the time to do it. Those days are dead. Your AIs can create all your automated tests for you now. So any Igor in your company who complains about automated testing is living far in the past. Create the cucumber tests for success and failure scenarios of interacting with the PayPal APL to make online payments. Blah, blah, blah for 4 seconds. And then here we go. The details don't matter, but it did it, and we didn't need some superhuman expert to solve the problem. Blah, 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 blah. It says, did I have a query in between there? No. Oh, it's just giving some example code. Go down further, final thoughts. And then I say, create complete JavaScript code for making online payments to the PayPal APL. Next thing you should know, if you didn't know already, these can work in any programming language. So then it generates all of the code in JavaScript for PayPal. Running and setting it up, blah, 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 blah. Rewrite that in Python. Your development manager at work says, oh, we can't rewrite the code. That would take too much time by too many people. This takes seconds using AIs. All of the arguments of your development managers about how hard it is to do this stuff are obviated now. And those managers have no understanding what's happening with these AIs, how powerful they are for all of this work. And then it rewrites the code in 13 seconds. And now it's all rewritten in Python. Blah, blah, blah. And then I go, review the Python code and suggest refactorings to make it clean. Igor at the company says, oh, we don't have time to create clean code. That's so effortful. Not true. Those days are dead. And then it makes the suggestions, blah, blah, blah. And you can probably anticipate what okay, it's got a lot to say. By the way, sometimes what I'll do is I'll throw this to Gemini, then throw the output of Gemini to Claude, and throw the output of Claude to Llama, and then you get all of these making it better and better and better. Agents can do that automatically, just interacting between them. Final thoughts, apply those refactorings and make the code better. And then it did that, and then here's the code that it's created after all of the refactorings. So I hope you can appreciate what a profound implication this is for all aspects of effort related to software development. This changes everything. And all of the, repeating now, all of the arguments you're hearing at work from managers and developers about the effort, they just don't make sense anymore. Those are false and flat arguments. And so to conclude, everything from product management to film creation to UI design to data scientists to database designers to coders to blah, 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 all of that will increasingly be able to be done powerfully and skillfully and quickly with AIs. And on for every aspect of human knowledge work that you can imagine. Some HR and org design implications. One way of framing this is Craig saying, AIs are finally doing knowledge work or routine expertise. This is what I've been waiting for since 1979. Because if you're in the AI world, you understand this story. And I've been waiting for decades for routine expertise to become into AIs, and now we're at that level. And of course, that spans almost all work that humans do. And all of these roles and related tasks are all examples of routine expertise. By the way, later on, I'll talk about non-routine expertise. AIs won't replace our narrow, single specialist routine jobs, says the wishful thinker. I will simply work more efficiently in my single specialty with AI, says the wishful thinker. I, the UI designer, my job isn't threatened. I'll just work more efficiently with an AI. I, the database designer, I won't be replaced. I'll work just more efficiently with an AI. You're going to hear lots of that from various wishful thinkers. Really? Let's unpack that box. How many people here are using, or the company is using Copilot? That is so 2024. And as you might know now, Copilot is dead. All of the leading developers in the world abandoned it and have moved to Cursor. If you go to Silicon Valley, you probably can't find a single developer who's using Copilot. It's so weak and outdated compared to Cursor. Cursor's taken over the world. Go start to investigate. You'll see that VCs are lining up, throwing billions of dollars at the company because it's so much better than Copilot, and that's why it's taken off around the world. So this is a good example of don't lock into a product. One of these old, weak AIs like Copilot is just crude compared to how sophisticated and powerful Cursor is. So another reason to not lock into the wrong tool choices. Another part of this story is, as far as I can tell, I don't know exactly, the Microsoft Copilot group is somewhere between 200 and 500 people. How many people make Cursor? 4. And they've beat Microsoft. And what profound secret sauce did they do? Simply, each of the 4 developers said, I was willing to do more than one thing. I was willing to multi-learn and do more than one thing. Those of you who know me know this is not a new message. The simple fact of multi-learning changes everything. Those of you who've been through my course with the healthcare.gov story, where 3,500 people were successfully replaced with 10 people because of multi-learning, it's that kind of story again. And one of the frictions to multi-learning is the time and effort to learn the new thing. But I want to remind you that AIs aren't doers, they're teachers, which means not only can we now interact with an AI to do all kinds of stuff, we can also use them to learn more as well. That changes everything. Multi-learning now becomes much simpler, and the power of multi-learning, what 4 developers can do versus 400 at Microsoft with multi-learning, is quite impressive. In the AI testing world, there's something called the software engineering bench, which is measuring how, and if you could do 100%, if you could pass the software engineering bench as a human, you're like a world-class developer. And already, Claude, for example, has gone from 3% to 62% in 12 months. That's incredible. By the way, Claude is the default behind Cursor, although you can add other AIs. Turns out, for whatever reason, Claude is the most powerful code-related AI at the moment. But that could change any day. And lingering on the subject of UI and UX, there's now a plethora of AI tools for all of this. So if you're still using humans for UI and UX, that's no longer necessary. automated test, code coverage effortlessly. I want to look at some numbers. Now, the numbers I'm going to share with you are just examples, but I think they can make the point. So what I did is I examined some different tasks that are done in software development. And then I was kind of wondering, and asking AIs about this as well, what is maybe the traditional person days effort for these tasks? Then I'll call something a GLAD developer. That means a generative LLM assisted developer, and instead of SAD developers. And these GLAD developers using AI, how much effort does it take them to do the same work? The ratio, that's the exact ratio, and then just rounding. So we're talking about 3,000 times faster, 20,000 times faster. And the point I want to make here is that if you've got managers or other people who think, oh, with AI we'll be 7% faster, you're not understanding. This is 20,000 times faster. This is orders of magnitude impact. The implications of this are quite interesting. And I recognize these are just example numbers, they're not averages, we don't know for sure, but I do claim that the impact is orders of magnitude, not 7%. That's the important thing to take from this example. Orders of magnitude. And these are with baby AIs. Imagine by the end of 2027. Therefore, please read. It's not hard to extrapolate and see that we're talking about with AI being able to do something 10 times to 1,000 to 10,000 times faster than before. That's dramatic. With much less effort, much less errors, and with much less prior expertise. Digging in a bit deeper, imagine we have a single specialist UI designer or database designer that can now do 300 person days of output in 3 person days or 30 person days. That's going to be realistic. And so this human previously took a whole year to do some amount of output, and that same amount of output could now be done in, let's say, 3 days. That's quite a realistic extrapolation. So we're going from 300 person days to 3 person days or 30 person days. That raises, of course, a question, a very practical question. What is that person going to do for the remaining 297 days at work? It's not a fantasy question. This is really going to come up. What will the database designer do for the remaining 297 days? Perhaps they will create lots more databases. Hey, I can now make 1 trillion databases a year. We don't need 1 trillion databases. So an important thing to understand here is that because with these tools you can produce so much, it doesn't mean you're going to produce 1,000 times more, because you don't need 1,000 web pages, you don't need 1,000 databases. So the assumption that the designer is going to create 10,000 more databases because they're faster is fallacious, because there's no customer demand or product demand for that work. So very unlikely. What will the database designer do for the remaining 297 days? Well, perhaps what we should do is fire all the designers except one, who then does all the database design. I predict, I could be wrong of course, but I predict that's unlikely, because they're still going to have 200 days left because of AI. So the question then just gets pushed back a little bit. What do they do with the 200 days? Unlikely, because other developers, key point, other developers can use these tools to quickly learn and create designs. So why do we have to depend upon them? And unlikely because it would create unnecessary delays and weak feedback loops. Hey, why are we waiting for Gita to do the database design when I can trivially do it myself? So all of that seems unrealistic, I would predict. What will the database designer do for the remaining 297 days? And I want to double click on this one that I mentioned already. This is a very important point. Why do we need to rely upon the erstwhile database designer or UI designer when any average developer can use these tools to create great solutions? Just realistically, I predict this is what's going to happen. Because AI makes it much easier to learn new skills and tools. That's so important to understand. These objects are teachers. And actually, let me linger on that point for a moment. Already, these AIs can explain almost any subject way better than any human teacher, any subject known to humankind. From history to politics to physics to mathematics, you can throw any question you want at an AI and it will give you a better, more thorough answer than any human teacher can give you, and we're just getting started. And they're infinitely patient. They're available there for 24/7. They can eventually become very fine-tuned to your particular mental model and adjust how they teach to your particular mental model. That's not far away. So think about what that implies for the entire education system of humanity. Why do we have teachers in schools? What's the point of that when AIs are so superior to human teachers? This is going to become a real serious question. Why on earth would I give my kid to a human and get a crappy education when the kid can get a great education with AIs? And a lot of people are going to think this way, for good reason. If you know the Khan Academy, for example, which is a well-known online educational system, they've now created the Khan AI, and that's just getting started. And I predict that we're going to be moving to a world where more and more parents are asking from some grade all the way through a graduate school, why are we hiring human teachers when they're obviously inferior to AI teachers? That's going to increasingly become a real question. And therefore, I predict from that that we're going to come to a disrupted model in all of education where probably very young children have humans around because we're social primates and we need that. But at some point, for any intellectual learning, I don't know, from 9 or 10 years on forward, I predict that young children will be interacting primarily with their AIs to learn, and there'll be some humans around for some kind of coordination or oversight. But that's going to shift everything as well. Also, I predict, these are not merely my predictions, but they're all kind of obvious when you think about it, that we're going to have personal AI assistants. Heck, you can already get them, although they're still, relatively immature, but extrapolate 3 years or 10 years. You can bet those AI assistants are going to become insane. I don't mean that literally. We hope. And then that assistant will be with me my entire life. Knows everything about my history, my mental model, and can continually advise me. This is not in the realm of science fiction. This is quite realistic. Not only on any subject of education, but life decisions, like how should I be investing, and on and on. Medical diagnosis, and on and on. And we're not talking 50 years in the future. We're talking like 2 years in the future, or maybe, 10 at the maximum. Another way of looking at this, if our species, Homo sapien, is 300,000 years old, and if this is the entire timeline of humanity, then in 1,000 years from now, when our AIs are teaching us history, if they want to really boil down history, they'll show a line of all of humanity. There'll be one line across it that it says 230, and it says artificial general intelligence as the most important milestone in the history of humanity. We're really close to this. It might not happen, I can't really predict, but certainly all the signals are it could happen. And if it is going to happen, it's probably going to happen within 5 to 10 years. And that changes everything. That changes everything. Now we've got super intelligences that are far beyond the intelligence of any human, and they can therefore make even stronger super intelligences. And I hope you can see that that just changes everything. And so I think it's possible to say this time is the most significant time in the history of the human race. So it's an extraordinary time to be alive. And I recognize, because I've been saying this since 2020, that I recognize that a lot of people might think this is crazy talk. But I notice that every 2 years that I say this, more people are understanding, oh yeah, I think that I could see this happening. The most significant milestone in human history is probably within our lifetime. That's extraordinary. Because on the back end of that, all kinds of human problems get solved. Let's take, for example, something like global warming and energy. As some of you probably know, there's 2 kinds of nuclear energy. There's nuclear fission, which is the splitting of the atom. And then there's nuclear fusion, which is the collapsing of atoms, which is how the sun works. And nuclear fusion, which has not yet been achieved by humans, is nevertheless within striking distance. And AIs, for example, AlphaFusion, created by Google, is now creating breakthroughs towards nuclear fusion. And if you go scan the web, you'll see that we're probably within 10 years or less of the first nuclear fusion demo plant, not commercial. Now, nuclear fusion, as you probably know, runs on water. So there's an infinite supply of it. It produces no radioactive waste. Second, a small number of plants could fuel the entire United States forever. And we're probably within 20 years of having widespread nuclear fusion, because AIs are getting so smart, they're able to solve the problems that we haven't been able to solve in nuclear fusion. Consider the implication of that. We're entering a world of infinite green, almost free electricity around the world, from Africa to North America to South America, just electricity, coming out of buckets. We got so much of it dirt cheap and clean, which means the end of the climate crisis, which means, think about what you can do with infinite free energy. You can do a heck of a lot in the world. Another deep disruption because of AI within our lifetimes. AlphaFold, which is going to revolutionize drug discovery. Imagine in 10 years we've got AGIs. Those AGIs will be using things like AlphaFold to therefore discover the drugs and therefore solve some of the diseases that we have, not all. But that also then implies a dramatic change in the healthcare and the health span of humans. Moving back to our story, if the database designer can much more easily, quickly learn and create automated tests, if the database designer can themselves learn to do front-end development, if the database designer can learn to do business analysis and back-end code and so on and so forth, then we have the concept of people having primary skills, secondary skills, tertiary skills, and doing skills learning in new domains. Realistic in the age of AI. If the database designer does database tasks for 10 days per year and learns and does UI design and programming and testing for 290 days of the year, then why do we have the single specialist job title of database designer? That doesn't make any sense anymore. And why is the career path from database designer 1 to database designer 2? That just doesn't make any sense. I hope you can see I'm not describing outlier, strange situations here. This seems to me quite probable or realistic with where these things are going. And that implies, with respect to HR and org design, a structural change. Introducing broader job titles that focus on a career path of multi-learning. Because why would we hire someone to be a database designer when they can do so many different things? We would want to hire someone who can learn new things, and working with AIs can do a bunch of different stuff. And so that suggests to me that the future direction of job classification will be broader rather than narrower. And an extrapolation of broader will imply a lot more learning. By the way, therefore, in terms of hiring, that would suggest you're going to be looking for people who are good at learning, not good at doing. And that leads us to what I call GLAD developers, generative AI and LLM assistant developers. Just a fun name I made up. Instead of sad developers, serial archaic developers. Then, if that's true, if we now have GLAD developers who are more broadly called product developers, if that's true, then a team is no longer like this. Instead, a team becomes this. And not in 20 years, but like in 6 months from now, this kind of thing can start to happen. With AI assistants. And by the way, multi-learning developers is not a new idea. Where does Scrum come from? Well, 1978, as you know, Harvard Business School, or some of you know, Takeuchi and Nonaka did research from 78 to 82, published a bunch of papers from 82 to 86, and then in 86 in the Harvard Business Review published the new product development game, introducing the name Scrum, and highlighting that multi-learning was a key factor for success. So this is ancient insight now finally being picked up by management. And I want to reiterate what's on the next page can happen very soon, not years in the future. You could set up teams like this today, easily and very effectively. I mentioned that AI agents are coming, and the implication a bit farther, let's say 1 year down the road. AI agents are already out, but they're still in their infancy. So just 1 year down the road, we'll be able to do this. Where the three humans, and I'll take your question in just a moment, where the three humans have spun up 100 agents and are monitoring them. I think broadly speaking, the path of humanity working with AIs will be early days assisting, later phase monitoring, and then last phase, let's go for lunch and play games, because they're taking care of all of the work. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
No, we'll keep going. Maybe you might answer it as you keep going. So
All right. And then, after this point, a couple of years later, and we start to move towards the one-person company. This won't change manager roles, says the wishful thinker. Well, if there's no database group, since there's no database designers, then why would you have a database design manager, etc.? Please read. In 2025, if your HR department and managers think that this is appropriate and is hiring people like this, they've all got their heads in the sand or have no understanding what's happened and what's coming. That's of the far past. And this begs the question, of course, well, what about humans? I'm on to grandchildren now, so the question for me is like, in what world will my grandchildren grow up into? Many of you probably have children, and the same question is relevant. If this is the most significant milestone in all of humanity, then the implication for our children is also salient and important. If I was a parent with children today in 2025, I'd be very suspicious today of the idea of continuing to put them through high school and university. It's an entirely dead model that's quickly going to become disrupted. So what value add can humans have? Well, if you look at knowledge work, at one end, on the amount of novelty, at the low end of novelty, you've got routine expertise, medical diagnosis, software development, lawyering, physicist, mathematician, and so forth. Well, what's left? And that's learning expertise. And this is where we, at least temporarily, have an edge. Because an AI has two phases, training and use. And I've learned that many people don't understand that during the use phase, they don't learn. How does an AI learn? Well, you take it to the ex-Colossus training center for 6 months. You throw $500 million of electricity at it. You train it on the entire corpus of human knowledge for 6 months, and there you go. And then you release it. But after that release, it is an idiot savant, and it can't learn anything more. Those 100 trillion real numbers that make up the neural network, they're frozen, and they don't change. It is a frozen, read-only, unchanging AI model. They learn nothing. If you're working with ChatGPT and it appears to you like the AI is learning, that's an illusion. It isn't. They're absolutely frozen. And all that's going on is that it's keeping track of your chat, and every time you ask a question, it's appending everything that you asked before into your next request and so forth. Yeah.
Might that change?
Pardon me?
Might that concept change in the near future?
Yes, but nobody knows how yet. And so now again, when AIs start making AIs, that might change. But at least for today, they're frozen and they can't learn except in the official training step. Now this is where humans add value, because one of the things we're great at, in fact, it's our superpower. We as a species have gone through all kinds of genetic bottlenecks that led us to get here. Fun facts, I can't remember when, but I think it was around 40,000 years ago, the entire population of Homo sapiens shrunk to like 1,000 or something in a small part of the Earth related to the Ice Age. But we made it through, and here we are. Why? Because we're so darn good at adapting. That's our superpower, which is related to learning. And so I predict that the longer-term future of humans and AIs will be using humans for what they're good at, adaptive learning, combined with AIs for the other. But in domains where we don't need adaptive learning, but it's routine expertise, there will be increasing labor market competition from AIs to supplant us with those jobs. Again, I mentioned that in the AI world, no one takes the Turing test seriously, but the test that they do take seriously is the ARC test, which I mentioned before. And the ARC test was created by François Chollet, and this is a milestone paper in the history of AI, 2019, on the measure of intelligence. That is from this paper that all modern AI researchers are taking their guidance for how to measure intelligence. And key point that Dr. Chollet makes is that the intelligence of a system, the human-like intelligence of a system, is a measure of its skill acquisition efficiency. In other words, how easy can an object learn new things, not do new things, learn new things. And us humans, heck, we learn without effort. That AI took 6 months in the Colossus Center and $500 million of electricity. It was the farthest thing from efficient skill acquisition. So this is still a place where humans have a big advantage. But note that what we're measuring in the ARC tests is the ability to do skills acquisition, analogical reasoning, that kind of stuff. Therefore, I suggest the future of humanity is probably going to be skill in multi-learning over skill in single doing. There will, of course, be exceptions. I'm talking about broad trends on average. And to repeat, but just to remind you, that implies in terms of HR and org design, moving to broader, more general job titles. Moving on. AIs will be high expertise, very low cost. They work nonstop forever. They don't take vacations. You don't have to hire them. You don't have to fire them. You don't have to worry about employee liability. So therefore, AIs will be labor market competition for humans. I'm myself a business owner of some small businesses. You know, I have to meet a payroll. I have to think about stuff like that. And me, like a lot of other people in the world, are going to wonder, well, I can have an AI do this for, 10 cents a year, or I can pay someone $300,000 a year to do it worse. It's not a very hard, reasoning. And so I predict there will be competition for jobs. And this is, by the way, by the time your children are growing up, this will be true. We're not talking 50 years in the future, we're talking 5 to 10 years in the future. And managers are going to have to justify hiring humans increasingly. And humans won't be able to compete if the best they can do is 20% better. Because these AIs, they have high expertise, low cost, work nonstop forever, etc. So we humans are going to have to do a heck of a lot better than 20% better to have any hope of being able to get employed in the future. By the way, sometimes I forget to mention this. People sometimes ask me what they recommend as a career for their kids these days, and I recommend the trades, the professional trades. Electrician is the quintessential example. Because of the coming nuclear fusion, the entire electricity grids of the world are going to have to be transformed, including all buildings, because we're going to have so much damn electricity we can throw at anything. There's going to be a massive need for electricians, plumbers, that kind of thing. Already, if you didn't know, these people make a lot of money. And they're going to have a long runway into the future, because this kind of manual dexterity, very difficult to do, even with humanoid robots are advancing apace, but the kind of manual dexterity we're talking about, hard. And so this combination of manual dexterity plus skilled knowledge, skilled trades, I think is a good long-term shot. Another place where there'll be some job protection, I think for some decades, is domains where there's certification required. Becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer. Those domains will have moats around them that will also protect them for a while. So that wouldn't be a bad place to get into. But other than those kinds of domains, all bets are off, it seems to me.
Why would you see a moat around doctors and lawyers when AI today, you can have it write up any legal document you want? You might hire a human to proofread it, like an editor, but that's significantly less work than generating the document in the first place.
I agree with you 100% abstractly. I'm just thinking about the political reality. The political reality is that for at least the next 20 years, the AMA or whatever it's called is going to fight to limit the use.
Well, I mean, like AI and robotics doing surgery, it's not legal here, it's legal in another country.
Yeah.
People already do medical vacations as it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mexico,
And there'll be more and more of that. Absolutely. And to double click on something I mentioned before, AIs have already been shown to be superior to any human doctor for diagnosis. So even starting today, I personally will interact with an AI for my questions because I find that far superior. Yeah.
I guess if learning is going to be more important, any suggestions in how to outlearn the competition?
That was my question too.
You mean outlearn other humans?
Like, what do we do? What do we do if we're
Like,
not?
how do you get
yeah.
better at learning faster?
Right, right.
Ask your AI. I'll tell you what,
No, I do know what you mean. That's exactly what I want, yeah.
on your tables you'll find paper, and I'd like to invite you to write down on the paper your questions that you have at the moment. I don't want to forget them. And if you write them down, then you don't have to hold on to them in your mind. You can just let them go and then concentrate. Let me finish saying my piece, and then I'll take all of your questions for a better flow. So please write them down so you don't forget them. So to conclude, humans won't compete if the best they can do is 20% better, I suggest. And I'm not talking now about next year, but imagine 10 or 20 years in the future, within the working lifetime of our kids, if not us. So how can humans compete? How can humans make huge performance impact and therefore remain interesting in the marketplace? And this takes us to the last topic that I want to cover today, which is called Elevating Performance in the Age of AI with Org Topologies, because there's an answer to this question through org topologies. Org topologies is an AI age change system, by which I mean to say we've created it mindful that AIs are going to be central to the workforce of the future, and so we're crafting it not like adding on AI something in the future, but from the ground up, org topologies assumes that the world of work is going to involve AIs and humanoid robots in a big way. So this is the first, I think, really modern management change approach. And another important point, org topologies is for making humans competitive by elevating the organization to high performance. And by the way, org topologies is for any product or service. Org topologies is for hospitals, farms, restaurants, music companies, universities. It's a completely generic change system which assumes that we're in the age of AIs and we'll have AIs and humanoid robots. And secondly, it makes an important value statement. We, the creators of org topologies, have decided to make a stake in the ground, which is that we want to promote humans in the future of work. And we're promoting org topologies as a human-centric way of AIs and humans to work together. And the bottom line is that we think that that will only be really competitive if the humans are in hugely higher performing organizations than today. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to sell the hiring of them. So let me compare and contrast two definitions of org topologies. Number one, org topologies is for elevating the organization to high performance. I might have written a pitch like that 20 years ago, and that'd be perfectly relevant before the age of AI. But no, I'm not saying that org topologies just allows you to create a huge high-performance organization, which is true. Org topologies is for making humans competitive by elevating the organization to high performance. This is a stake in the ground, a moral position that we're taking, which is that we want to encourage future organizations that welcome and promote and protect humans at work, but in a way that's win-win by working in organizations that are way more high performance than they are today. So org topologies is an AI change approach that's explicitly human-centric, and its purpose is for keeping and hiring people in a new high-performance organization. That's the big vision. Originally created by Alexi and Roland, and now I'm participating as well. Alexi and Roland are coming, I think here, I don't know when it is, October, to do a course on elevating performance in the age of AI with org topologies to learn some more details. Backing up on the OT subject, how can humans make huge impact on performance and therefore compete for jobs in the age of AI? That's the problem that we're trying to solve. not just high-performance organizations, but high-performance organizations that can promote humans competitively. When the competition is strong, cheap, and doesn't sleep. Can humans make a huge impact on performance and therefore be competitive in the labor market within existing organizations plus AI? For example, suppose you have an existing business analysis group, product management group, front-end group, database group, and you add AIs to this existing groups. Will this create huge orders of magnitude greater performance in your existing organization? I suggest that's unlikely, because that's just the status quo amped up with a bit of intelligence. It'll make a small change, like maybe a 20% change in the performance of your organization, but not a 10-time or 1,000-time improvement in the performance of your organization. Not good enough, we suggest, if humans want to compete. So will this create huge performance gains? I suggest it's unlikely. And by the way, your average competitors will do that, thus giving you no advantage. All your competitors will do that, so if you do that as well, you'll have no advantage at all. So how to get a huge performance advantage by elevating your organization to make humans be promoted and competitive. Therefore, to make huge performance improvements with humans and AI, we predict we're going to have to change existing organizations. So, org topologies is an AI age change system for making humans competitive by elevating the organization to high performance. Now, to repeat, OT is for elevating the organization to high performance, but there is an age-old problem: change fails. And there's at least one person in this room who will have seen an organizational change failure. Anybody seen one? Yeah, it's very common. If you look at the literature, in fact, literature shows that most change initiatives fail. So, OT is human-centric. Not only is it human-centric in terms of promoting humans in the age of AI, but it's human-centric in recognizing why change usually fails and considers the human factors in more successful change. What are those? If you look into why change succeeds or fails, there's some things that are associated with more likely success. Like, number one, people own the change ideas. They didn't get them from McKinsey. They didn't get them from consulting company X. They didn't get them from a book. But the people inside of the company created and owned the change idea. Many of you know about Dr. Kotter, famous change researcher at Harvard. And his conclusion is that for successful change, the change solution must come from within. And I'm completely on board with that in my experience as well. Second reason related to successful change is that not just 3 people in the company with PhDs in physics can tell you what you've decided to do, but average people in the company can understand your existing system, can understand your future target system, this high-performance, high-elevated system. And that's really important for successful change. The human factors of change is critical. And for successful org change, the hands-on people involved in this can understand why the change is happening and explain why. In other words, it's clear to people deeply what's going on. That's important for successful change. So it ain't enough to introduce a change idea. The key to successful change is human adoption factors. So please read. OT, being very human-centric, is quite sensitive to these human factors issues for successful change. And org change in the age of AI same point, OT is being designed for those points. Now, there's a fair amount to learn about OT. It's not very complicated, that's the whole point, but I certainly can't explain it to you in 3 minutes in this meetup. So I'm just going to give you a the briefest of introduction to some of the details. A key element is the Org Topologies Mapping Workshop. It's what you'll experience if you take the course here in October. And this uses a simple and visual tool. Again, we're humans. Visual tools are very helpful for being human-centric, that average people can understand and use to redesign and elevate their organization. OT is for that. And those of you, like in this room, we've got on the wall there a system model. Those of you who've been through the course with me know that we're doing a system modeling workshop for 3 days. And those of you who have been through that know that you own the insights and deeply understand because you've done that. And that makes a world of difference in successful change. OT is very similar in that dynamic. Although it doesn't involve systems modeling and mapping, it involves org topologies mapping. One of the elements of OT is called the Org Topologies Map. And briefly speaking, our target is that we're aiming for elevated organizations that are up here. Let me just briefly explain the map to you. So this X scale or dimension is the scope of skills mandate. This means what scope of skills are people allowed to apply at work? And if the only thing that you're allowed to do at work is front-end UI wireframes, very narrow scope, you'd be down here. And if the scope of skills mandate, notice the careful word mandate. This just isn't about the scope of skills that you might know. This is what you're allowed to do at work, which is a slightly different thing, but quite relevant. Because we are usually limited in the scope of what we can do at work, sad to say. All the way through to here, where the official work mandate is you can apply any skill that you can imagine in the world in order to get work done. And this moves us from people and teams that can only do incomplete solutions towards teams that can do complete solutions because they have all the skills. This dimension is the scope of work mandate. What work are you allowed to do and create? And down here, we've got work that involves creating outputs. So for example, if you make code, you're making output. If you make a business analysis document, you're making an output, and so on and so forth. And then the scope of work mandate, what you can take on within the company is very limited. Oh, I'm in the insurance company. I'm only allowed to create UI design documents. And so I've got a low scope of work, and there's my output. On the other hand, up here, we've got people and teams whose scope of work mandate includes business outcomes, like increasing market share, or increasing profit, or more ideation, or whatever it is that you're actually trying to achieve in the company. This is what performance is related to. And so in this quadrant of this 2x2, we've got people and teams that are allowed to do and encouraged to do anything in the world to get the job done. And furthermore, they're allowed to do practically anything in the company in order to make money. And so imagine you've got teams that can do anything and that have the mandate to just go and make as much darn money as you can make. That's powerful. And if your whole company was just filled with people like that instead of database designers and BA analysts and so forth, that's incredible how much impact you could make as a business if everyone is focused like that. And so we call that an elevated organization. And in the OT mapping workshop and the course, you learn a lot more about this and how to go through understanding your current state, really owning that insight, understanding the next state, and a lot more details. But I'll leave it just quite simply at that. But you can probably see from the simple introduction that the idea of OT mapping is not limited to any domain. This applies to restaurants, hospitals, software development, anything. The other thing to see about OT mapping, it's not a particular change solution, it's a approach to change. So because we're not going to define for you, because it's applicable to any domain, what your solution should be, other than the abstraction of people and teams that have the mandate to do anything and solve any business problem. And then in the workshop and course, you learn a lot of the granular details of how that fits into your particular company. And you'll do mapping exercises for your particular company in the course where you learn to understand your current state, where you would redesign your organizational structure in the next state at a more concrete level.
Correct. There's a longer conversation on the Collab Leadership Team's YouTube channel between Alexa and Angela. So that was nice. If you want to know a little bit more, you can go have that conversation.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any existing actual solutions, actual org system solutions that are examples of this elevation? Oh, that's a surprise. Closing. If you go to LinkedIn, you'll see I'm a junior GLAD developer and happy to connect with folks. And now I'd like to take questions. Let me just start back up here. And I'll go around robin.
When we train AI, we feed every bit of information we can fit into it. But when we use AI, how do you feed big things into it? How do you say, these are the financial records for the last 50 years? Punch them.
You can literally say just that. And there's a good chance, I mean, as long as it's got an API to access what you want, there's a good chance that it can then do it. Like you might have noticed that in my demo, under the wine set, I just started off by saying, load the blah, blah, blah. I have no idea how it did that, but it did it.
And the baby tools I have access to right now, can they do that?
Well, this is just ChatGPT 4.5. It's, standard stuff. It's not even advanced. Yeah. And if it's data within your existing company in a data warehouse or whatever,